How many times have you heard the words of Psalm 23? You may have memorized it in Sunday school, whispered it in the middle of the night, when the fear was real and the silence even louder. You've seen it printed on walls, stitched into pillows, repeated in times of pain. The Lord is my shepherd. Those words are familiar, safe. But are they understood? Because Psalm 23 is more than a poetic comfort. It's more than background noise for sorrow or a sentimental verse printed on a wall. It's a battle cry, a roadmap, a revelation. And David, he didn't write this from a palace. He didn't write it to soothe others. He didn't just write about a shepherd. He was one. He knew what it meant to fight off wolves, to walk through dark valleys with nothing but a sling in his hand and faith in his heart. That's why every word bleeds with meaning. He wrote it from the raw, bloodied pages of his own survival story. This is not a lullaby. It's a testimony. And centuries later, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, would echo these words not with a harp, but with his own life. And suddenly Psalm 23 wasn't just David's story, it became ours. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe there's a part of you, tired, questioning, quietly desperate, that's ready to hear these words again, but with new ears, with open eyes, with a heart that's not just looking for a shepherd, but needs one. In this video, we're going to explore Psalm 23 like you've never heard it before, verse by verse, line by line, and hidden in each one is a truth that's both ancient and urgent. We'll uncover how this psalm doesn't just mirror your personal struggles, but prophetically points to Jesus in a way most people have never noticed. And if you stay with me, later in this video, I'll show you how David's seemingly simple words carry a pattern of survival, one that reflects not only our journey through pain and restoration, but God's pursuit of us through every season of life. But first, we have to strip away the familiarity. We have to come to this psalm not with the calm voice of tradition, but with the hunger of someone standing in the valley, looking for hope. Because here's what most people miss. Psalm 23 isn't a funeral psalm. It's a warrior's declaration. And David, before he was king, was a shepherd. Before he led men, he led sheep. He knew what it meant to fight off wolves in the dark, to sleep with one eye open, to walk the valleys no one else dared walk. When he said, "The Lord is my shepherd," he wasn't being poetic. He was making a statement of survival. So if you've ever walked through the shadows, if you've ever wondered if God is really with you in the silence, then this psalm is for you. Let's begin at the beginning, but this time with fresh eyes. The Lord is my shepherd. That opening line from Psalm 23 is so familiar, it's easy to miss the weight behind it. But David wasn't writing a metaphor. He wasn't reaching for a poetic flourish. He was speaking from the deepest layers of his lived experience. David knew shepherding. He didn't learn it from scrolls or synagogue teachings. He lived it in the fields. He fought off lions. He wrestled bears. He slept in caves and walked through wild terrain to protect sheep that didn't even know they were in danger. When David calls the Lord his shepherd, he's not being religious, he's being real. The original Hebrew here is powerful. The Lord is my shepherd, not just a shepherd, not a distant figure, but mine. It's a declaration of covenant loyalty. David is saying, the same God who holds galaxies in place is the one guiding my every step, fighting my battles, and protecting me even when I don't see it. And here's the twist. David wasn't just identifying with the sheep. He was also foreshadowing the shepherd who was to come. Because centuries later, Jesus would say in John chapter 10, verse 11, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Do you see the connection? David wielded a rod to defend his sheep. Jesus became the rod, struck for our iniquities. David risked his life to save lambs. Jesus gave his life to save souls. David was the shepherd king of Israel, but Jesus is the shepherd king of eternity. And maybe that's what makes this opening line more than comforting. It makes it radical, because it forces us to ask, who's really leading my life? Not in theory, not on Sundays, but in the daily moments, in the decisions, in the fears that grip you at 2 a.m. Who holds the staff? We all follow something, a career, a relationship, a habit, a fear. But only one shepherd lays down his life to lead you out of the wilderness. David wasn't boasting when he said, "The Lord is my shepherd." He was surrendering. So let me ask you, who or what are you depending on to lead your life today? Because the rest of this psalm means nothing if you don't know who's guiding your next step. And in the next line, David says something surprising, something we'll miss if we think the shepherd only brings comfort. He says, "I shall not want." But what if you still do? Let's keep going. He makes me lie down. At first glance, it sounds peaceful, like a gentle invitation. But if you've ever tried to make a sheep lie down, you'll know it's anything but easy. Sheep don't rest on command. They only lie down when 4 specific conditions are met. They must be free from fear, tension with others, hunger and torment from pests. In other words, rest doesn't come naturally. It must be made possible. So when David writes in Psalm chapter 23, verse 2, "He makes me lie down in green pastures," he's not describing a spa day. He's confessing something deeper. Sometimes God has to intervene, interrupt your momentum, because you won't stop on your own. We live in a world that worships exhaustion. We praise productivity like it's a virtue, but your soul wasn't built to run without rhythm. And God, the shepherd, knows that. So when your pace becomes unsustainable, when your striving drowns out his whisper, he does something most of us mistake for punishment. He makes you lie down. Sometimes it looks like disappointment. Other times it looks like burnout, a missed opportunity, a closed door, a quiet season that feels like a failure. But what if it's not? What if your exhaustion isn't a sign that you're broken, but that you're being loved? You see, green pastures don't always feel green at first. Often they look like places you didn't choose, jobs you didn't expect to lose, health battles you didn't ask for. But underneath it all is a shepherd who knows what your soul needs more than you do. And when he says lie down, he's not asking for compliance. He's inviting you to receive. Because the same God who leads you also knows when to slow you. David didn't say, "He invites me to take a break." He said, "He makes me." Not because God is harsh, but because he is good. The shepherd doesn't wait until we collapse. He leads us to stillness before the collapse comes. So here's the honest question. Could your burnout be a divine invitation to stillness? Could the slowdown you're resisting be the restoration you're praying for? The shepherd doesn't just offer you peace. He sometimes forces you to pause long enough to feel it. And as David continues, we see that stillness isn't the destination, it's the preparation. Because next, the shepherd begins to lead again, and where he leads may surprise you. Let's go there next. He leads me beside still waters. At first it sounds tranquil, serene, like the kind of place you'd go to clear your head. But Psalm 23 isn't about vacation, it's about survival. And David, the warrior shepherd, wasn't describing a retreat. He was describing the discipline of peace. Still, waters weren't just for drinking. They were safe places for sheep, because rushing streams could sweep them away. With their thick wool, even a slip into fast-moving water could mean death. So the shepherd had to guide them with care, not just to water, but to water they could trust. And that's the secret. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of safety, trust, order. And here's the part we don't like to admit. Most of us don't know how to rest in still waters because we've gotten used to drinking from the river of anxiety. We gulp down busyness. We feast on worry. We scroll through the chaos, sip stress like morning coffee, and call it normal. But what if Jesus is offering something entirely different? Do you remember the woman at the well? In John chapter 4, she came for physical water, but Jesus offered something more. He said, "Whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again." She was searching for relief. He gave her a new reality. That's what the shepherd does. He doesn't just lead you away from danger, he leads you toward himself, toward peace that isn't based on circumstances, but rooted in who he is. Because true peace isn't a place, it's a person. It's not found in a calendar with empty squares. It's not hiding in a quiet cabin in the woods. It's found in the presence of the shepherd who knows exactly what your soul is craving. David had seen both kinds of waters. He'd wandered beside chaos. He'd fled for his life. He'd battled in caves and cried in silence. But he had also learned this. The Lord doesn't just calm the water, he calms the heart. So maybe what you need right now isn't a change in your schedule, but a return to stillness. A stillness that isn't forced, but led. A peace that flows not from performance, but from presence. And just when you think that peace is the goal, David reveals something more. Because after stillness comes something unexpected. A restoration. Let's explore what that truly means. Next. He restores my soul. It sounds gentle, doesn't it? Like the soft brushing away of sorrow or a whispered encouragement in the dark. But when David wrote these words in Psalm chapter 23, verse 3, he wasn't talking about mere comfort. He was talking about rescue. In the original Hebrew, the word for restore is shuv. It means to return, to bring back, to turn around. And this wasn't abstract theology to David. He knew what it meant to fall and to be brought back. There's a haunting image in ancient shepherding, something only those who've tended real sheep understand. It's called a cast sheep. It's a sheep that has fallen over onto its back and can't get up. Its legs flail, its breathing becomes shallow, and unless the shepherd finds it in time, it will die that way, stuck, helpless, completely unaware of how much danger it's in. And what does the shepherd do? He doesn't yell. He doesn't shame. He kneels. He gently turns the sheep over, massages its legs, waits until it can stand again, until it can walk again, until it's restored. That's the picture David paints. And it's more than poetic. It's personal, because David had been a cast sheep. He had stood on a palace rooftop when he should have been at war. He had taken what wasn't his, lied to cover it, murdered to hide it. And when the prophet Nathan confronted him, David broke. But he didn't run. He returned. And in Psalm chapter 51, the confession psalm, he cried out, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation." God did. This is not the story of a perfect man. This is the story of a fallen man restored by a faithful shepherd. So let me ask you, have you ever felt too far gone, too broken to be brought back, too tangled in shame to be lifted up? The shepherd is not afraid of your fall. In fact, he specializes in it. He restores what religion writes off. He lifts what others leave behind. He doesn't discard the cast down. He rescues them. He restores them. And that's not the end of the story, because once your soul has been lifted, it needs to be led. And David says something next that's easy to overlook, but holds a truth so many miss. He leads me in paths of righteousness. We often assume this means comfort, that when God is leading, the road will be smooth, the skies clear, the journey straight. But David knew better. When he wrote Psalm chapter 23, verse 3, he was not promising ease. He was proclaiming trust. In Hebrew, the phrase paths of righteousness means more than morality. It speaks of right paths, paths that are both morally sound and strategically wise. These are paths the shepherd chooses not only because they're good, but because they're best, even when they're hard. And sometimes they're incredibly hard. Ask Joseph, who followed the dream God gave him, only to be betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and forgotten in a prison cell. Ask Moses, who obeyed the call of God, only to spend 40 years wandering with a rebellious people. Ask Jesus, who followed the will of the Father all the way to the cross. These were righteous paths, but they weren't easy, and the truth is, that mess you're in right now, that stretch of road that feels confusing or unfair, it may not be evidence that you've taken a wrong turn. It may be proof that you're on the exact path God has chosen for your soul. But here's the key. The shepherd doesn't just send you down the road. He leads you. That means he's ahead of you, clearing obstacles, watching for danger, guiding your steps, even when you don't realize you're being guided. And yes, sometimes it feels like he's silent. But silence isn't absence. In fact, the shepherd's leadership is often clearest in hindsight, like a divine GPS recalculating your steps, not based on your failures, but based on his faithfulness. Have you ever missed a turn, only to find a new road still waiting? That's not coincidence. That's grace. And maybe your detour wasn't a detour at all. Maybe it was the right path, just not the easy one. Because righteousness isn't always lined with applause. Sometimes it's lined with resistance, loneliness, or even sorrow. But it's still the way, and the shepherd still leads. But what happens when that path leads into shadow? What if the next step of righteousness takes you into a place you fear most? Because David's next words don't describe a mountaintop, they describe a valley. And not just any valley, the valley of deep darkness. Let's walk there next, together. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. These are the most quoted words in Psalm 23, but they're often misunderstood. This isn't about the moment of dying, it's about living through darkness. David doesn't say if I walk through the valley, he says even though. It's a certainty, not a possibility. Valleys are part of the journey. even for the righteous, even when God is leading. In Hebrew, the phrase is Tsalmaveth, the valley of deep darkness. It doesn't just mean physical death. It means shadowed places, hidden threats, the unknown, the terrifying, the moments when you can't see what's ahead, and the silence of God feels like abandonment. But notice what David says next. I will fear no evil, not because evil doesn't exist, but because you are with me. That's the turning point in the psalm, right here. The pronoun shifts. Before, David was talking about God. Now he's talking to him. When life was green pastures and still waters, David said, He leads me, He restores me. But in the valley, the language becomes personal. You are with me. Because valleys have a way of stripping us down to what's real. No more religion, no more routine, just you and God, in the dark. And that's when you discover something that sermons can't teach and comfort can't fake. The shepherd doesn't avoid the valley. He walks through it, with you. Do you remember Gethsemane, when Jesus cried out in agony, sweating drops of blood? He too walked through the valley, not just beside us, but ahead of us. He descended into our darkest shadows so we'd never have to walk them alone. And here's the hidden hope in the verse. It's a shadow, which means there must be light nearby. Shadows only exist when light is present, and the presence of that shadow may terrify you, but it's also proof that the shepherd is near. So if you're in that place today, the place of questions, of uncertainty, of dread, you are not abandoned. You're accompanied. The valley is not your enemy. It's your classroom. It's where theology becomes intimacy, where fear becomes faith. But the shepherd doesn't stop there. Because in the next line, David doesn't speak about walking anymore. He talks about fighting. And the shepherd? He's not just guiding now. He's defending. Let's look at that. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. It's one of the most surprising lines in Psalm chapter 23, verse 4. Comfort. From a rod, from a staff. These aren't soft tools. They're instruments of action, of defense, discipline, and authority. David would know. He had carried both. The rod was a weapon, a short, sturdy club used to strike predators, to guard the flock against danger. And the staff, that long, crook-shaped tool, was used to guide, to pull sheep back from cliffs, to redirect the ones who drifted. Together, they formed the shepherd's arsenal, not against the sheep, but for them. And David says they comfort him, because when you know who your shepherd is, even his correction becomes reassurance. You don't have to fear the valley when you know the one walking with you is armed and willing to fight for you. This is where we confront one of the hardest truths of the Christian life. Sometimes the very thing that feels like God's discipline is actually His protection. That disappointment you didn't understand, that relationship that fell apart, that closed door you begged Him to open. What if the shepherd pulled you back with his staff, because what was ahead would have destroyed you? David had seen that mercy firsthand. He had been corrected, redirected, broken, and loved in the breaking. Because the shepherd doesn't correct out of anger. He corrects out of attachment. And when he fights, he doesn't fight from a distance. He fights right there, in the valley, in the mess, in the middle of the fear. So the next time you feel that gentle pressure steering you back, or that painful pause that keeps you from running headlong into something, remember this. Correction isn't rejection. It's redemption in disguise. And the rod? The rod is not your punishment. It's your protection. The shepherd doesn't swing it at you. He swings it for you. There's comfort in knowing your shepherd is not passive. He's not indifferent. He sees the danger before you do, and he's not afraid to act. So if you've been wandering, if the path got blurry and you felt his pull, don't resist it. That's not him punishing you. That's him rescuing you. And after the battle, after the defense, something unexpected happens. The shepherd doesn't just guard you from enemies. He prepares a table in front of them. And the meaning of that table might change how you see victory forever. Let's go there next. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. It's one of the most radical images in Psalm chapter 23, verse 5. Because if you were writing this psalm, wouldn't you expect the next line to be something like, "You destroy my enemies," or "You rescue me from their presence"? But that's not what David says. He says God sets a table, right there, in the middle of the battlefield. This is not a picture of escape. It's a picture of honor. The shepherd doesn't remove the wolves. He doesn't silence the mockers or erase the critics. Instead, he feeds you right in front of them. He lays out provision, peace, security, and your enemies, they have to watch, because victory isn't always about elimination. Sometimes it's about elevation. Think of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, enslaved, imprisoned. But in Genesis chapter 45, he stands as ruler over Egypt and says to them, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." His table was prepared, in full view of those who once tried to bury him. Or Daniel, thrown into a den of lions for his faithfulness. But the next morning, it was his accusers who were judged, while Daniel feasted on God's faithfulness. Or Jesus, who, knowing betrayal was coming, still broke bread at a table with his enemies. And later, in plain sight of mocking crowds and cruel soldiers, he displayed a victory not of might, but of mercy. That's the kind of table David is describing. A table in the tension, not after the battle, but in it. And here's the part that stings a little. Sometimes God doesn't remove your enemies because he wants to bless you in spite of them. Sometimes the miracle isn't deliverance, it's dignity in the fire. Your enemies may surround you, but they do not seat you. God does. And maybe you've been praying for escape when God is trying to give you endurance. Maybe you've been begging for him to take the pain away, when instead he's preparing a feast right there in it. So let me ask you, what table has God set for you in a place you never expected? Because this psalm isn't leading toward comfort, it's building toward confidence. And at the center of that confidence comes something sacred. The shepherd anoints. And that next line, it's more than ceremonial, it's powerful. Let's discover why. You anoint my head with oil. In ancient times, anointing wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Shepherds would pour oil over the heads of their sheep to protect them. Why? Because sheep are vulnerable, not just to predators, but to pests. Tiny flies would swarm around their heads, crawl into their ears, and lay eggs that drove them mad. The irritation could become so unbearable that some sheep would beat their heads against rocks just to find relief. So what did the shepherd do? He covered their heads with oil. The oil became a barrier, a healing balm, a weapon of mercy against what would have destroyed them from the inside out. And David says, You anoint my head, not because he's royalty, though he was, not because he's worthy, because he wasn't, but because the shepherd saw what was unseen, the attacks no one else noticed, the inner torments, the slow, silent erosion of the soul. And the shepherd responded, not with armor, but with oil. It's the same oil used to commission kings, the same oil used to consecrate priests, the same oil poured out in John chapter 12, when Mary anointed the feet of Jesus just days before his crucifixion. Oil in Scripture always signifies something deeper. It's healing, it's calling, it's covering. And in David's life, this wasn't theory, it was memory. As a teenage shepherd, he was summoned from the fields, and the prophet Samuel poured oil over his head. 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 13 says, "And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward." But what about you? What if the oil being poured over you in this season isn't for ease, but for endurance? What if the favor of God on your life doesn't look like applause, but like protection in the unseen battles? Because God's anointing is not for comfort, it's for assignment. It doesn't always make you feel powerful. Sometimes it just keeps you sane. It shields you when no one else sees the fight you're in. It reminds you that you are chosen, even when life feels chaotic. So let me tell you this. The shepherd never anoints you for no reason. If you feel the oil, it means there's a battle, but also a purpose. And just when it seems like the psalm has reached its peak, David reveals something stunning. You're not just standing, you're being pursued. Let's explore that truth. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Most of us read that line from Psalm chapter 23 verse 6 as a soft conclusion, like a gentle breeze after a storm. But that's not what David is saying. This is not passive poetry. It's a pursuit. The Hebrew word for follow is radaf. It doesn't mean to trail behind politely. It means to pursue, to chase, to hunt down with intensity. And what is chasing you? Not judgment, not shame, not punishment, but goodness and mercy. That changes everything. Because most of us live like we're being chased by our past, haunted by our failures, tracked by anxiety. We run faster, work harder, exhaust ourselves trying to stay ahead of regret. But David flips the script. He's not running from something. He's being pursued by someone, and that someone is relentless. This isn't mercy that waits for you to ask. This is mercy that comes after you when you're not even looking for it, when you're wandering, when you're stubborn, when you're too ashamed to come back. Think of Peter. After denying Jesus 3 times, he didn't return to the disciples in glory. He went back to fishing, back to what he knew, back to what felt safe. But in John chapter 21, Jesus shows up on the shoreline, not with a rebuke, but with breakfast. He doesn't lecture Peter, he restores him, he chases him with mercy, and sits him down at a fire to remind him, "You're still mine." That's the shepherd's heart. And his goodness, it's not just kindness, it's provision. It's the steady hand that writes beauty into broken chapters. It's the grace that shows up when you least expect it and need it most. You may think you've outrun God, but the shepherd doesn't tire. He doesn't quit. He doesn't lose track. His mercy doesn't arrive late. It arrives exactly when your strength runs out. So, let me ask you, can you remember a time when God chased you down? Not with punishment, but with love. Not with shame, but with arms wide open, because that's what David saw. A God who didn't just guide him in the light, but pursued him in the dark. And now, at the end of the journey, David lifts his eyes and sees the destination. It's not rest, it's not a throne, it's home. Let's finish the journey. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David ends Psalm 23 not with triumph or vengeance, but with arrival, not at a battlefield or a palace, but at home. It's easy to overlook that line, to hear it like a hymn or a closing prayer. But this is more than a poetic finale. It's the destination the entire psalm has been leading toward. From green pastures to dark valleys, from oil and tables to mercy chasing you down, every moment was drawing David closer to one truth. You were made for communion, not just survival. I will dwell, he says. Not visit, not pass through, not drop in on holy days. Dwell. This is language of belonging, of permanence, of presence. And in David's time, the house of the Lord referred to the tabernacle, the sacred place where God's presence dwelled. For David, it was the ultimate longing, to not just know about God, but to live with him, to abide. And centuries later, Jesus would echo that same longing. In John chapter 14, as he prepared to face the cross, Jesus told his disciples, "In my Father's house are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you." The shepherd was going ahead to make sure his sheep had a place to rest, not just in this life, but forever. And that's the promise hidden in David's final line. Eternal life doesn't start when you die. It starts when you dwell, when you stop treating God as a visitor and welcome him as your home. When you stop running from place to place, hoping to find peace in your circumstances, and realize peace is a person who walks with you, prepares you, pursues you, and brings you home. That's the secret hidden in every verse of this psalm. It begins with trust, the Lord is my shepherd, and it ends with home. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So wherever you are on the journey, whether you're in green pastures or deep valleys, whether you feel anointed or abandoned, know this: you are not wandering, you are being led, and the destination? It's not escape, it's not relief, it's Him, the shepherd who became the king. Let's reflect on that in our final moments together. From the very first words, "The Lord is my shepherd," to the final promise, "I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Psalm 23 has taken us on a journey, not just through fields and valleys, but through the very heart of God. This wasn't just a psalm about sheep. It was the testimony of a shepherd who became a king, and it's the echo of a greater shepherd who reigns as king forever. David's life mirrored the psalm he wrote. He was chosen in obscurity, anointed in the fields, hunted in the wilderness, restored after failure, elevated in the presence of enemies. And through it all, he was pursued, not by fame or power, but by God's goodness and mercy. And Jesus? He walked that same road. But where David fought with rod and staff, Jesus fought with nails and thorns. Where David spoke of oil, Jesus was anointed for burial. Where David feared no evil, Jesus faced evil head-on and overcame it. He is the shepherd who became the lamb, and the lamb who now reigns as the eternal shepherd king. So if you've ever wondered whether Psalm 23 still speaks, it does. It speaks to the weary, you are not alone. It speaks to the wandering, you are being led. It speaks to the wounded, you are being restored. And it speaks to you, wherever you are, saying, you are not forgotten. Because this isn't just David's story, it's yours. The shepherd has walked every path you're on, and his voice still calls your name. So now, if this psalm means more to you than it ever has, share it with someone who needs a shepherd. And in the comments, tell me, what verse from this psalm speaks to you the loudest today? Because your story might be the encouragement someone else is waiting for. Let's keep walking. Let's keep trusting. And let's never forget, the shepherd never left. He's just getting you home.